Welcome. Today, we're jumping into something pretty amazing that's happening right inside you. This really surprising link between your gut and your brain. We've got a whole stack of sources, scientific articles, research papers, some interesting talks. And the plan is to pull out the key stuff, the really important bits, so you can get a solid handle on how this all works. Today, specifically, we're looking at how diet and those tiny microbes in your gut can have this huge effect on your mental state, your mood, your overall health.
Yeah, and it's way more than just, butterflies or gut feel. I mean, those phrases exist for a reason, sure. But the science, it's showing this connection is, well, incredibly deep. It's influencing your mood day to day, sure, but also memory, maybe even how you make decisions. It's this constant conversation happening inside.
Okay, let's try and unpack that a bit. This hidden world inside us, the gut microbiome. It's hard to even picture the scale, right? We're talking trillions of bacteria, viruses, fungi, all living in your digestive tract, sometimes like 10 or even 15 times more bacterial cells than human cells in your whole body. It's kind of mind-blowing. And while scientists have found maybe over 1,000 species out there, most of us, the average person, probably carries around about 160 different types.
It really is its own ecosystem. And when we talk about a healthy microbiota, it's not necessarily about hunting for one specific super microbe. It's more about a few key things, like how well does it resist disturbances? Can it fight off bad bugs trying to move in? And resilience, how quickly does it bounce back if something knocks it off balance, like, say, taking antibiotics? But maybe most importantly, it's about richness, just the sheer number of microbes and diversity, the variety, how many different kinds are there? Think of it like a thriving rainforest. Lots of different species working together makes the whole thing stronger, more stable.
All right, so variety is key. Balance. Not just finding one magic bullet. Can you give us a few examples? Who are some of the players in this internal rainforest?
Sure. So you often hear about the good guys like bifidobacteria and lactobacilli. They're the ones you'll often see advertised in probiotics. And then there are what we might call potential pathogens. These are microbes that aren't necessarily bad all the time, but if they grow too much, they can cause issues, like certain types of E. coli or Clostridium. If that balance tips too far, towards these less friendly types, your risk for certain diseases can go up. There's even this ongoing discussion, a bit of a debate really, about the ratio of two big groups, firmicutes and bacteroidetes, and whether that balance links to things like obesity.
Okay, a debate. So what does that mean for us? Should we be, tracking our firmicutes ratio?
Probably not yet. It just shows we're still figuring things out. These two groups are huge players, yeah. But pinning down exactly how their balance affects weight or metabolism is complex. Science is still digging into that. What is clear, though, is that this whole gut community does some incredible work. It breaks down food parts we can't digest ourselves, like certain fibers. It actually produces essential vitamins for us, like vitamin B and K. Plus, it helps train and regulate our immune system, and it protects us from harmful germs trying to set up shop. It's like this built-in helper system.
Okay, this is where my mind starts to get blown. How does this huge community down in our gut actually talk to our brain? It can't just be a vague feeling. What are the actual lines of communication?
Exactly. It's not vague at all. There are several really distinct pathways. Maybe the most direct, the biggest one, is the vagus nerve. Think of it like a massive data cable, a superhighway, running straight from the gut to the brain. But here's the kicker. Something like 80% of the signals traveling along that nerve are going from the gut up to the brain, not the other way around.
Wait, 80%? Upwards.
Yep.
So your gut is constantly sending updates, information, status reports, you could say, straight to headquarters.
That's incredible. So the gut isn't just taking orders, it's actively informing the brain. What else? Is it just nerve signals?
No, not at all. There are also chemical messengers. We call them microbial metabolites, basically tiny molecules produced by your gut microbes that can travel and influence things. And some of the most important ones are short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs. You might hear names like acetate, butyrate, propionate. These are made when your microbes ferment the fiber you eat, the stuff you can't digest. And these SCFAs, they act almost like hormones. They can influence the brain directly, for instance, helping to keep the blood-brain barrier strong. That's like the security gate for your brain. And they work indirectly too, influencing inflammation levels throughout your body, affecting other hormones, impacting memory. There's even research suggesting they might help with depressive symptoms.
Wow. So tiny bugs eating fiber make chemicals that travel all the way up and actually change how our brain works and how we feel. That's wild. It really is. And it doesn't stop there. Your gut microbes can also produce neurotransmitters themselves, the chemical messengers the brain uses, like serotonin.
Yeah, the mood chemical.
Exactly. Well, get this. Maybe 90% of your body's serotonin isn't made in your brain. It's made in your gut.
90%.
Yep. And the microbes living there play a big role in how much is produced and available. They can also make other neuroactive things like dopamine, GABA. And when these are out of balance in the gut, we see links to conditions like depression and anxiety.
Okay, it really is like a second brain down there churning out these critical mood chemicals.
In some ways, yeah, it's a useful analogy. Then there's the immune system connection. If your gut microbes are out of whack, the term is dysbiosis. Basically, an unhealthy balance, it can trigger low-level chronic inflammation. Like certain bacteria release these molecules, LPS for example, that provoke an immune response. And this ongoing inflammation isn't just local. It can affect that blood-brain barrier we mentioned, potentially making it leaky.
Leaky, so things get through that shouldn't.
Exactly. And that can lead to inflammation in the brain, neuroinflammation, which, as you can imagine, isn't good for brain function and might even contribute to neurodegenerative diseases down the line.
Man. So an unhappy gut can literally mean an inflamed brain. That really changes how you think about things.
It does. And one more pathway, Kananat, the endocrine system. Hormones. Your gut microbes can influence the production of gut hormones, like GLP-1 and PYY. These are involved in appetite, telling your brain when you're full, and they also play a really important part in regulating the HPA axis.
The HPA axis, that's the stress response system, right?
Precisely. Your body's main way of handling stress. So your gut microbes can actually influence how stressed you feel or how your body reacts to stressful situations.
Okay, this is huge. Given all these connections, what does it mean for what we eat? It sounds like diet has got to be one of the biggest levers we could pull to influence this whole gut-brain thing.
Absolutely. Diet is fundamental. It's literally feeding that ecosystem inside you. So let's talk about what helps. First, fiber. We mentioned it for SCFAs. Fiber is essentially a prebiotic. It's food for your microbes. And honestly, most people, especially in the UK and US, just aren't getting enough. The recommendation in the UK is 30 grams a day, but many people get like half that.
Wow, only half.
Yeah. Fiber keeps things moving, but crucially, it feeds those beneficial microbes. You find it in, the good stuff. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds.
More plants, basically.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but it's about feeding the good guys down there.
Okay. What about fermented foods? They're everywhere now. Kimchi, kefir.
Right. Fermented foods are interesting because they work a bit differently. They contain live microorganisms, probiotics. There was this really fascinating study, quite a landmark one, comparing diets rich in fiber versus diets rich in low-sugar fermented foods. And they found that eating a good amount of fermented foods, like 4 to 6 servings a day in the study, significantly boosted the diversity of the microbiome, and it lowered inflammatory markers in the body. 4 to 6 servings, that sounds like quite a lot.
It's a fair bit, yeah. Examples are things like plain yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, natto. The key thing is to look for ones with live active cultures, usually the refrigerated ones. And a little tip. Making your own sauerkraut is actually super easy. Just cabbage, salt, water. It's cheap and it's live.
That's a great practical tip, making it accessible. Okay, fiber, fermented foods. Anything else that's a superstar for the gut?
Definitely. Polyphenols. These are compounds found in lots of plant foods.
Like in red wine and dark chocolate.
Exactly. Also in berries, colorful vegetables, spices, cocoa, whole grains, nuts, olive oil, coffee, green tea. They give plants their bright colors often. And here's the cool part. Most polyphenols, maybe 90–95%, aren't actually absorbed by us higher up. They travel down to the colon. And guess who loves them?
Our microbes.
You got it. They break them down, and in doing so, they act kind of like prebiotics feeding the good bugs. Plus, the breakdown products themselves can be beneficial, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, neuroprotective. Observational studies have even linked higher polyphenol intake with lower rates of depression.
So the colors in our food aren't just pretty, they're feeding our gut buddies who then help our brain. Nice loop.
It is. And nuts deserve a mention too. Good fiber, healthy fats, those bioactive compounds. Eating nuts has been shown to increase beneficial bacteria like Faecalibacterium and Roseburia. And if you zoom out and look at overall eating patterns, the Mediterranean diet keeps coming up as, well, kind of a gold standard. It's very plant-focused, lots of grains, fiber, often includes fermented foods like yogurt, plus fish. And it's not just theory, it's been linked to better cognition. And one randomized controlled trial showed it led to a 35% decreased risk of depression compared to a control group.
35%. From diet. That's a really powerful number.
It really is.
But, okay, if there are foods that help, there must be foods that don't help, or
Yeah.
maybe even harm. What should we be a bit more careful with?
Yeah, absolutely. Things like ultra-processed foods, foods really high in sugar, unhealthy fats, these tend to have a negative impact. They can sort of starve out the beneficial bacteria and let the less helpful ones take over. And sweeteners, it's a bit of a mixed bag there. Artificial ones like aspartame, saccharin, sucralose, even natural non-nutritive ones like stevia. Some studies suggest they might harm microbial diversity or reduce those good SCFAs like butyrate. Others show no clear effect, or maybe it depends on how much actually reaches the colon. What is interesting is that specialized cells in our gut seem to react differently to artificial sweeteners versus real sugar. They can tell the difference, which might explain why, diet soda sometimes doesn't quite satisfy that craving. Your brain might not be getting the full sugar-received signal from the gut.
Ah, fascinating. So my gut knows if I'm trying to trick it. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. How does all this play out in specific conditions? You mentioned depression and anxiety.
Right. Building on that, we often see distinct gut microbiome profiles in people with anxiety and depression. Typically less diversity, maybe more of those potentially problematic bacteria. And studies using probiotic supplements with specific strains like bifidobacterium and lactobacillus have shown some positive effects on depressive symptoms. They might also help calm down an overactive stress response, that HPA axis. But it's really important to add a note of caution here. Sometimes striving for the perfect gut-healthy diet can actually increase anxiety if it becomes too obsessive. Balance is key.
That's such an important point. It's about sustainable health, not stressful perfection. What about conditions like cognitive decline, Alzheimer's? Is there a link there too?
We're seeing more and more evidence pointing that way. For example, markers of inflammation in the gut, like high calprotectin in stool samples, have been linked to more amyloid plaques in the brain. Those are hallmarks of Alzheimer's and also to worse verbal memory. People with Alzheimer's often have an altered gut microbiome again, usually less diversity, fewer beneficial bugs. Animal studies are even suggesting it might be causal, not just correlation. And there was a small human trial where giving probiotics to Alzheimer's patients actually led to some improvement in cognitive scores. Even other molecules from microbes, like secondary bile acids, might play a role in how well our brains function as we age.
So changes in the gut could potentially contribute to these incredibly serious brain conditions.
Yeah.
Well, it's sobering, but also maybe offers new avenues for help.
Potentially, yes. It's an active area of research. We see similar patterns in Parkinson's disease, too. Patients often have different gut bacteria profiles, lower levels of SCFAs. And again, animal studies hint at mechanisms giving butyrate, one of those SCFAs, seem to improve motor problems and dopamine levels in Parkinson's models. And with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, it's well known that GI issues are common in individuals with ASD, and they often have distinct microbial signatures. Some studies using probiotics have reported improvements in certain ASD symptoms, though it's still early days.
It really drives home how connected the gut is to so many aspects of brain health and function. But you mentioned earlier, diet isn't the only thing affecting our microbiome, right?
Oh, absolutely not. It's a huge factor, maybe the easiest one for us to modify day to day, but definitely not the only one. Think about early life. How you were born C-section versus vaginally what you were fed early on, breast milk, versus formula when you started solid foods. All these things have a massive impact on how your gut microbiome first gets set up. Those first 1,000 days from conception to age 2 roughly are incredibly critical for laying the foundation, and that has long-term effects on brain development, immune function, everything. And then just general lifestyle. Age plays a role. Diversity tends to decrease as we get older. Stress, chronic stress, is really bad for the microbiome. Sleep, poor sleep, seems to favor the less beneficial bacteria. Exercise, on the other hand, especially aerobic activity, tends to boost diversity.
So it really is a whole life, whole body picture. Not just food, but stress, sleep, movement.
Exactly. And medications are a big one, too. Antibiotics are the obvious example. They're lifesavers, of course, but they can be like a bomb going off in your gut ecosystem, wiping out good guys along with the bad. Sometimes the microbiome bounces back. Sometimes the changes can be long-lasting. That's why doctors are getting much more careful about prescribing them, especially for young children. And finally, even just our environment. Living in super clean, highly sanitized environments might actually reduce our exposure to diverse microbes, potentially leading to lower gut diversity. Some research even links this hygiene hypothesis to increased rates of things like allergies, asthma, and maybe even some neurodevelopmental conditions like autism and ADHD.
Wow. So trying too hard to be clean might actually backfire on our internal ecosystem. Okay, so pulling all this together, there's a lot here. It's fascinating, maybe a bit overwhelming. What are the main takeaways for someone listening? What should they focus on?
Okay, let's boil it down. I think the biggest message is focus on variety, especially plant variety. Eating lots of different types of fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, seeds that feeds diverse microbes and encourages a diverse community. Don't just eat the same 5 veggies every week, mix it up. Second, really prioritize fiber and fermented foods. Think of fiber as the fuel and fermented foods as potentially adding new beneficial residents. Small, sustainable changes can add up. Maybe aim for half your plate being frozen veggies at lunch and dinner. Add some kimchi or sauerkraut as a side. Drink some kefir. Third, don't forget the lifestyle stuff. Manage stress as best you can. Prioritize sleep. They genuinely impact your gut health, which impacts your brain. And maybe a final thought on this. Making dietary improvements is often way more sustainable, cheaper, and probably has broader benefits for your mental health in the long run than just relying on expensive supplements.
Food first, right. But you mentioned supplements, probiotics. They're so popular. What's the verdict there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd offer a note of caution. The research here is still pretty young, especially good quality human trials. A lot of findings are from animal studies, and they don't always translate perfectly. We're still learning which specific strains do what and how much difference there is between individuals. Also, megadosing probiotics isn't necessarily better. Some studies link really high doses to side effects like brain fog in certain people. Generally, unless you have a specific condition where a doctor recommends a particular probiotic, focusing on feeding the microbes you already have with fiber and diverse plant foods is probably a better starting point for most people.
That makes sense and definitely underscores the point.
Fair.
Always talk to your doctor or a qualified healthcare professional before making big changes to your diet or starting new supplements, especially if you have existing health conditions.
Absolutely crucial.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful. Thank you. And just to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to chew on, consider this. When you're making choices about food, when you feel those cravings, how much of that is purely your rational decision? And how much might be influenced by those trillions of microbes in your gut, sending signals up that superhighway to your brain? Thinking about it that way gives you a whole new perspective, maybe even a little bit more control or at least understanding of your own behavior. It really encourages you to, well, listen to your gut in every sense of the word.